The Sony A1 Mark II is the king of Sony's mirrorless lineup. In fact, it might just be the king of mirrorless cameras in general, which is to say that this camera can pretty much do it all. As a Canon shooter, I was curious how this camera would perform vlogging, creating content, making YouTube videos, capturing photos, and what the overall experience of this camera was like, and whether or not it could replace something like my Canon R5 Mark II, or be enough to convince me to switch to Sony. And while I think that's a silly conversation to have, like, both of these cameras are amazing. Both Canon and Sony make awesome cameras that fit the needs of professional photographers. There are actually a few conditions under which I would consider switching from Canon to Sony, but I'm gonna save that to the end of the video because I'm gonna bring in my friend Jonathan, who also shoots on Canon, to get some of our unfiltered first impressions of the Sony A1ii Mark II. So now we are vlogging on the A1, no steady shot, or just the regular. Oh, look at this!
Oh, what's up? What up, what up?
Bunch of Sony shooters. What do you, can I join the club
I mean, technically you have the most expensive Sony camera in your hand, so I guess you're pretty much like forced into the club.
I guess I count now.
You didn't ask, but like you're forced into it now.
What do you think of this setup? Nisi filter, Rode mic.
Honestly, it looks like if you won the lottery and your A7 IV decided to get a facelift, because it does. It looks like just another alpha camera. Yeah. It's shaped a bit differently. I could see that, but like that setup kind of just looks like your typical 16 to 35 with an ND filter on the front.
That's what it is. 16 to 35 G Master 2. We'll test the image stabilization. How does it compare to Canon? Stay tuned. So would I actually consider switching to Sony or a camera like the A1ii Mark II? It goes without saying that this is an incredible camera. And while it does have a lot of similar specs as my R5 Mark II, there are some slight differences that gives the Sony an advantage. But it's an advantage that costs about $2,000 more, which says a lot about the value of the R5 Mark II. And I know what you're already saying in the comments is that I probably should be comparing it to something like the Canon R1, because both of those are that 1 series flagship camera, but I'm gonna save that discussion for a little bit later in the video. Now, I often get asked why I don't talk more about Sony cameras, or why I haven't already switched from a Canon to a Sony, when it seems like every other YouTuber in North America, at least, seems to create their content and film their videos on a Sony camera. Believe it or not, there are actually a few instances under which I would consider switching, but it would end up being a parallel switch, meaning that I'd basically be jumping from one system to another and not really gaining anything extra, or at least not gaining anything that I don't already have or need. So then why don't I just talk about Sony? Well, the problem is I don't have enough money to invest in 2 different systems, in multiple sets of batteries and accessories and things for both Canon and Sony. And you see the same with a lot of other YouTubers. So if someone is a known Sony shooter, more than likely they're not really talking about Canon cameras on their channel, unless they are a dedicated photography camera tech review channel. But there are 3 specific instances under which I would consider switching, but I'll talk more about that in a bit. Kofi is behind us right now, and we're doing a follow shot. We've got the Osmo Pocket is attached to the back of the car, and Kofi's got like 3 cameras rigged up back there. Little bit scary, but well, we'll see if they stay attached. This isn't my usual shot, but car shots at 16mm kind of look nice. And the 24 frames per second standard image stabilization. There is the active and the dynamic, which is 2 steps higher, which crops in and kind of applies extra digital image stabilization. Can we see the Broncos behind us? How do we feel about the Kofi cups? They holding up?
Oh yeah.
The 1 cup, maybe not enough. 2 is 1, 1 is none, especially in the winter when there's like salt and dirt and bumpy roads and potholes. Yeah. Like you're seeing it right now, so I don't know. Let me know how the image stabilization is. Are the corner wobbles better or worse than Canon? I actually think it looks pretty good. It's a, oh gosh, there's a lot of shakes right now.
It's better than the Canon, I know that, okay? I watch your videos too, I see them.
Well, Rich is an A7R5 type of guy.
I have the active stabilization. I know this one has the dynamic.
My vlog from Sony Kondo, I actually was on the A9 III, which I believe also has the same sort of standard active and active dynamic. Maybe I should put it on right now because it's a little bit shaky. Three things that I like about the Alpha 1 Mark II and about Sony in general. Sony always seems to be one step ahead in releasing video features that are in demand, or at least the video features that everyone is asking for. One of those that I noticed immediately when using this camera is that the digital level on the screen stays on while you're recording. For whatever reason, Canon decides to turn it off while you're recording, and I wish they at least gave you the option to have that show up so you could tell whether or not your footage and your camera was level. The other one is LUTs. Now, this is a new feature to the Alpha 1 Mark II, is that you can actually put viewing LUTs. So on the R5 Mark II, I can put a LUT, but it burns it into the footage. Whereas with the Sony, I can decide whether or not I want to view it in log, in Rec 709, and then you can scroll down the menu to all of the user LUTs so that if you have a creative LUT that you want to see right in camera, you can do that. Sony seems to have figured out how to make their screens like perfectly geometric. One of the weird things on Canon is that when you flip out the screen and are viewing it from the side, it's not actually perfectly in line. And I think Jared Poland complains about this all the time. It's like, Canon, please just fix that like 2 degrees that when you take the camera and you flip out the screen, it's just like, why is it off? Like, why isn't this level with the back of the camera? Now, in terms of the screens, both of these have very similar resolution, but the difference between the R5 Mark II and the A1 Mark II is that the viewfinder is like 9 million dots versus the Canon, I think, is around 500,000 dots. And I'll put both of those numbers on the screen now, but the one thing you can definitely tell, and one of the first things I noticed when picking up this camera and shooting photos, is that the viewfinder quality is excellent. When we're talking about cameras at this level, both the Canon cameras and the Sony cameras have dual card slots. But the nice thing with the Sony is that you have the option of doing 2 SD cards or 2 CF Express A cards, whereas with Canon, you have to do one of each. So a CF Express B and an SD card. Personally, I would prefer if Canon, at least on their higher end models, went to both CF Express Type B cards because they are pretty much the fastest cards that you can get. But it is nice that if you, let's say you only do photos and you don't need those fast read and write speeds for 8K video, that you don't need to use CF Express Type A cards, you can use SD cards. And then the third point is kind of like a mega point, but the Sony ecosystem is amazing. The fact that you have FX30s and then FX3s and then FX6s all the way up to the Sony Venice, the system is very scalable. And I feel like Canon is lagging a little bit behind in that there are some gaps when you're looking at, you know, the Canon R5. Yes, you have the R5C, kind of a weird in-between camera in my opinion, but there's nothing that's like an FX30 equivalent. An FX3 you could say is the R5C, but I feel like Sony has that advantage in the sense that their camera bodies are smaller, the FX line, the FX3, because it doesn't have a viewfinder, whereas the R5C is a very chunky camera, and personally not one that I would use even if all I did was video. But the G Master lenses do tend to be like a hair cheaper, like $100 cheaper in some cases. And if you're someone, if for whatever reason is buying like 4, 5, 6, 10 of these lenses, then that could actually result in a couple $1,000s worth of savings. But all of those little things don't really make a difference in the way that I capture content. And there are a few others that I'm gonna talk about later on in a bit. But one of the things that absolutely makes a difference in the way that I create, in the way that I edit, are all of those extra bits and pieces. So not just the video that I'm capturing on the R1 or the R5, but also the music and the sound effects, and even the way that I record my voice using professional grade
studio microphones.
And if you've been around the channel long enough, you know where I'm headed with this. Artlist, who is the sponsor of today's video, allows you to get access to all those resources so that you can create amazing content, whether you shoot on Canon, Sony, or some other camera brand. Artlist is royalty free, so I can use their assets in my videos or on my Instagram posts or even in my client work, and I never have to worry about getting hit with royalties or getting a copyright strike. Or if you need sound effects for when something pops up on screen, or in my case, when I'm showing photos and I want a camera sound effect, well, I can go on and get all those things from Artlist. But they also have a new feature, which is their AI voiceover, and you've probably heard me talk about it in the past, but they're adding something new, which you can access right now, where you can record your own voice. So we're gonna demo this and see how this works, but then basically upload it and it will match the timing and the pronunciation and the pace of the way that you're speaking. So let's give this a try. Artlist is your all-in-one stop for music, sound effects, and everything that you need to create your video content. So now I need to choose a voice from their catalog. Wait a few seconds for it to upload, hit generate, and this is what I get.
Artlist is your all-in-one stop for music, sound effects, and
everything that you need to create your video content. And it's only getting better.
So check out my exclusive link for 2 months free down in the description.
And big thanks to Artlist for continuing to be a supporter of this channel and everything that I do.
Now, back to the video.
Way better than the other stuff. Not too bad. Holy man, look at that rig.
So we have a casualty of war here.
Yeah.
So one of the things on the capture cups that I was literally just about to say in the next clip is to make sure that you have ratchet straps so things in case they fall off. You guys can't see it because it didn't make any giant cosmetic damage, but my camera fell off when I accidentally slammed the door of my car.
Listen, what's the rule? 2 is 1, 1 is none. Now we have 2 cups and our safety harness there. So that's like 3. That's like 3 for 1.
The worst part about it is I was just about to say like, hey, we put ratchet straps in these specifically for that problem.
But we're getting the footage.
Hey, you know what?
We're getting it.
We have like this going on. I think it'll be okay as long as there's enough tension in here in case like it falls, but.
There are 3 things that kind of don't matter when it comes to comparing Sony to Canon, or at least don't matter in my case. One of those is the log color profile. Now, the R5ii has C-Log 2, and the A1ii has S-Log 3. In my opinion, I've edited footage from both, and now that Canon introduced the better log color profile in C-Log 2, the difference is kind of negligible. Both of those profiles are very forgiving and have the flexibility and the room if you want to really color grade and get in and edit your video footage. Sensor speed and resolution is a hot topic because for some photographers, this is really gonna matter. If you are a wildlife or a sports photographer, having the fastest sensor on the market is a big deal. And of course we know that the A9 Mark III from Sony has a 0 millisecond readout speed. It is a global shutter. But right behind the A9 Mark III is the Canon R1. That has roughly a 2.7 millisecond readout sensor. And then you have the A1 Mark II, which has a roughly, if I have the number right, it is 4 milliseconds compared to the R5ii, which is 6.3. Now, that may not sound like a lot, but for some photographers that will matter. For me personally, it doesn't make that big of a difference. Unless I'm shooting those really niche types of photography, like a hummingbird flapping its wings or a F1 race car crossing the finish line. It feels like it's fine.
Hey! Hey, it works!
Wait, hold on, did we fix it?
Yeah, I got knocked to the manual mode, I guess.
I fixed it.
I mean, I could still take photos on it on the touchscreen. I still could do video.
This is a lesson that when you're doing risky things and trying to get cool shots, things can happen. So take care of your cameras, treat them nice, unless you're like Kofi and you have 100 million cameras and a Pixis.
Hey, lower your language, bro. This is a guy with his Hasselblads and his A1s. No, why don't you sell this one and get me a next one?
I can't sell, this one doesn't belong to me, so I can't sell it, you know? So this is active dynamic. You can see that there is a lot less space at 16 millimeters around my face, but you're probably getting the sense that the footage is a lot smoother. I think I'll knock it down one extra bit because this is a little bit too much for me. I'm running back to do the exact same view again to so you can see what the framing looks like. There's 16, so this is active, not active dynamic, active. You're also gonna notice it's a little bit stabler, not as stable as the dynamic, but you get a little bit more room around you. You might see 50 megapixels on the A1 and go, well, that's better than the 45 megapixels on the R5 Mark II. But when you actually look at the numbers, it's like 600 pixels of difference between the two, and not something that is gonna significantly impact my decision. Now, the autofocus, the color science, the image quality from both of these cameras is incredible. It's top tier. And when we were shooting these photos of swans, the A1 II honed in, found the eye of the swan. Now, of course, there is the autofocus mode that is now on this camera, which wasn't on the original A1, but that is actually something that has been on Canon for a little while. The auto mode is pretty much what I leave my R5 Mark II on, so I don't necessarily have to say, you know, I'm looking for a human subject, or I'm looking for a car, or I'm looking for an animal. It automatically, in the auto mode, assumes what it is that I'm shooting and finds it. So it's nice that now we have some parity between both of those brands. Color science is a weird one, and I feel qualified to talk about this because I would say that probably half of the photos that you see of me holding a Canon camera on my Instagram profile were shot with my friends who shoot Sony. They would send me the files, I would edit them, and I wouldn't be able to notice any advantage or disadvantage. I think if you know how to edit inside of Lightroom and you know how to tweak the color calibration and really get in there, you can make any photo from like a starting base point from one camera look like a similar photo from another camera. Sony, of course, has the advantage that E-mount mirrorless lenses have been longer than RF mount lenses, but Canon shooters have the advantage that if they go back to EF series DSLR lenses and get an adapter, a lot of those lenses, those L series, those older L series lenses can be had for half of the price of RF series lenses, and you still get the same great optical quality.
This camera stays. This camera, I keep that thing on me. You know what I mean, bro? I keep that thing on me.
Hold on, I'm going to get the Hasselblad. I'm actually running with the active mode on. Got it.
Yeah, if you had the other one, I think I'd be like,
I have both.
into it. That one, I don't.
You can basically fit
a
medium format camera where you would normally fit one lens.
Yeah, but I got hands though. You see this? You see I got hands though. Like, this is Anthony, and when his girl said not to worry about him.
GFXs are awesome, okay?
All right, so we got some really classic hard mount car shots, and one thing that I want to reiterate is safety first, guys. You might lose your camera.
The Kofi cups held up.
You're gonna keep calling it that, aren't you? You're gonna keep calling it.
Someone had to do it. It'll be me. I'll take the blame.
Gugliata pasta.
Gugliata pasta? What the? So Jonathan, two fellow Canon R5 shooters currently being recorded on the Sony A1 Mark II. You had a second to look at it. What do you think of it?
It looks nice. I like the compactness. The R5 is a great camera, but it feels massive sometimes.
The Sony cameras are a little bit more compact, and if we're talking about overall features and layout and buttons, I think the Canon does win a little bit in ergonomics because that extra size does give you like a little bit more hand holding capability on it. Like I know you've got your cage on here, R5 Mark II shooter, you know. The thing that I find weird, and maybe it's just I'm not used to it, is I find the camera slow to change modes.
Yeah, the dials were, well, the one dial's very stiff, and then the unlock mechanism on the other two, although not as stiff, it just feels like there's a lot going on to change modes.
So the Sony A1 II has a few extra dials. You've got the front rolly dial, you have the rear dial, same as the Canon, you have the top dial, but then because there's no like digital top screen, there's room for another dial. Now that extra dial is by default, at least on the way it was set up, is exposure compensation, which is awesome if you're shooting in like shutter priority or aperture priority. But the button on it is a click button. So you can like physically lock it or unlock it and leave it in that state.
It feels stiff. Like if you're trying to shoot on the fly, and let's just give an example. Say we were doing motorsports or airshow or time sensitivity maybe.
And you want to go from like shutter priority or like custom mode 1 to custom mode 2.
Yeah, we got to change something like that. It's so stiff, you might be fumbling to change the mode.
One thing that's different is that on the left side of the A1, there is a mode dial for both autofocus modes and shooting modes. So continuous, like high speed, low speed, medium speed, bracketing, timed, which is not something that you have on Canon. So how do you feel, like, do you feel like that's something you would want?
It's a little strange because I have shot bracketing, and you and I have talked about this when we were doing the Eclipse, for example.
Yeah.
You know, it's not hard on most, even on Nikon, to set a bracketing usually on the menu. This has it right on the body physically.
Could be fast to get to.
It's interesting, but I'd be curious from landscape guys who do bracketing, like how often do you really need it as a dial? Like, is it going to change your mind?
I talked to our friend Rich, who shoots on the A7R5, which is also one of the newer Sony cameras. That camera doesn't have that mode dial, and he actually has his different speeds set up to his function button, so that he hit the FN button, it pulls up a menu, and he can change it. And he said he prefers that. Now, on his camera, there's physically no mode, there's nothing there on that side of the camera. So it is something to be said about, you know, it's nice that you have that. I'm imagining the person who's shooting with this camera being someone who's doing a lot of like photojournalism and might want to go from shooting like all of a sudden just, you know, at a slow speed burst, and then maybe some action happens and they're like, oh, quick. Like, it's always going to be faster to hit one physical button than it is to go function, button, 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 button. So I think it all depends on your use case.
And I will say, when we have shot airshow, example last year, there were times I switched from burst to single fire modes.
Yeah.
And you have to stop your shooting to actually...
You're looking at the screen.
Yeah.
You're going
looking
in.
at the screen, either through the EVF or the back screen, to flip through menuing. So if you get pretty good at switching those modes, perhaps you will save time. But again, I don't think it's very common that someone's going to be switching that much. So it seems like more of a nice to have dial than a necessity.
I can already see the comments down below being like, why are you talking about the A1 to the R5ii and not the R1? Like, why are we not comparing?
Well, aren't the buttons on the R1 basically the same?
They are, but it's also like, in terms of price bracket,
yeah,
those are the two cameras that are at the top of the line. But it's funny because
I don't think anyone shoots R1.
I don't know anyone who shoots an R1. Again, it's one of those niche cameras that are targeted at the high-speed sports wildlife enthusiasts who maybe don't need a lot of megapixels.
Yep.
But I'm thinking, you know, photojournalism, someone who maybe wants the ability to crop more with 50 megapixels, which is what this is. Again, very comparable to the R5 Mark II. Now, this is going to have a faster sensor readout, which is awesome. The R5ii is not quite as fast, but I think for our application, like the times we are shooting sports and motorsports and fast things is like this.
How many times a year? 3 times a year, maybe?
We're not gonna, I never feel like my sensor's not fast enough.
No.
I mean, I'll put this photo on the screen now that was on the R5 that I shot last year, and you do see a little bit of rolling shutter because the sensor isn't super fast. But again, that was shot in electronic
We're talking
shutter.
Indy?
Talking about the Indy, yeah, the finish line shot that I got last year.
I don't think I noticed anything on mine.
You probably wouldn't unless you were doing
really pixel peaking.
Really pixel peeping, really panning really fast, and shooting in electronic shutter. 3 things that I don't like about the Sony A1 Mark II and about Sony cameras. This is gonna be a short list because there really aren't that many things to complain about, but one of the big ones is the amount of cameras Sony has in its lineup. And just to read off my notes here, because there are a lot, we have the A1, the A7R, the A9, the A7, the A7S, the ZVE1, the A7C2, the A7CR, and so what's that? There's like a 61 megapixel, a 50 megapixel, a 33, and a 12 megapixel. The challenge is that there's a lot of variety in there, and as a new photographer who maybe wants to get into something that's a little bit nicer, so one of those full frame cameras, we're not talking about crop sensor here, but if you're looking at a full frame camera, you might be confused. Like, what is the difference between an A9 and an A7R5? Obviously, if you know the cameras, the difference makes a lot of sense to you, but we're getting to the point where technology is so good that I wouldn't be surprised in the next few years if Sony starts to drop maybe 1 or 2 of those cameras because all of the cameras are great, because they can all shoot high resolution 50, 60 megapixels, and they can all do 8K or 6K video. Canon's lineup is a little bit more streamlined in the sense that they have 5 cameras, so the R1, the R3, the R5, the R6, and the R8. And it's either a 45 megapixel sensor, which is the R5ii, or everything else is a 24 megapixel sensor. So a lot of the Canon cameras tend to be a little bit more hybrid than some of the cameras like the A7R, which tends to be photocentric because of all those extra megapixels. Or the A7CR, which has the same sensor, but is just in a smaller, more affordable form factor. I was actually surprised that the Alpha 1 Mark II didn't have 8K 60 RAW, which the R5ii has, and again, it's a less expensive camera. Mind you, it will overheat and you have the grip accessories and all that to go with it, but at least with Canon, it is a nice add-on if that's a feature that you could maybe see yourself occasionally using. Screen quality is a big one. With some of the less expensive Sony models, the back tilty flippy screen isn't as good as what you get on even some of the lower end Canon cameras. And one of the things that I absolutely love on my Canon cameras is the top LCD screen. So Canon has this, some of the Fuji cameras have this. I'm actually surprised that Sony is still relying a lot on a physical dial, when in some sense, the digital dial, the mode dial, has advantages in that you can share extra information on it. But again, that's a very small list, and a lot of those things are very nitpicky and probably some things that you haven't even thought about. But maybe there are a few things that you have thought about that maybe sway you towards Canon or to Sony, or maybe there's a feature that one has that the other doesn't that I haven't mentioned. Let me know down in the comments below.
Is this an R3 equivalent?
No, this is an R1
This is an
equivalent.
R1 equivalent.
Yeah.
No one shoots the R1.
This is an R1. Oh, someone's flying a drone. Don't do that, kids. Don't fly drones in the Toronto Harbor.
Dummy day today. We're outside of a police station. How does this compare to a Hasselblad?
How does it compare to the Hasselblad? Totally different cameras. This is a fun GFX. Taha, what do you think?
Let me ask you this: if you're going R1 versus A1, all things considered.
Oh, I would choose an Alpha 1 too.
And as a Canon shooter, I think I would go with this one as well.
The only reason I don't is I don't.
Megapixels is one.
Megapixels.
If you're gonna spend the money on this kind of camera,
yes.
Why wouldn't you get the one with the higher megapixels?
More versatility in terms of being able to fit this into my camera bag. I can't fit an R1 or an R3. It's just too big to be portable to like put on my camera clip or put on my...
For those who don't know, the R1 has an integrated grip, which is not detachable.
Yeah, and with the Sony, it's extra. Now, I will say, I have talked to Sony shooters who moved from the original A1 to the R5ii. And one of the reasons they said was because the R5ii, the video is just sharper because of the oversampling of the sensor. There's the fine mode where you can read out the whole 8K and it not compresses it, but downscales it to 4K. And that video has less moire, which if you know what moire is, it's like when the textures of things lines up with the pixel grid on the camera. We'll not get into it, but basically the point being is that the R5ii has a little bit of an advantage when you compare the megapixels and resolution of the sensor to the final output of 4K video. So we'll leave it at that.
Slightly better hybrid shooting on the Canon, but better photography off the Sony. Is that what we're thinking?
I think it depends on your use case.
All right.
It should be pretty obvious at this point what the things are that would make me switch from Canon to Sony. And one of these kind of doesn't matter because the big one is C-Log 2. I think if Canon hadn't introduced C-Log 2 into the R5 Mark II, I probably would have seriously considered switching over to Sony. And I still really want to see them introduce C-Log 2 in maybe like an R6 Mark III or the R8 Mark II or whatever full frame cameras come next. Because the challenge is when you don't have a color profile on one camera and then you have it on another and then you start mixing because maybe you're doing a video shoot, that's where things can get a little bit sticky. And that is actually one of the things that Sony has that's an advantage if you are a video shooter. You can buy a lower end camera and get the same S-Log3 Cine color profile, that log color profile that's in all of their high-end cameras. If some sort of crazy camera lens came out that was E-mount, whether that's a Sony G Master or some sort of Sigma lens that just blows everyone's mind, if there was something that I needed that Canon then didn't have, that is something that would make me switch. Now, for a lot of wildlife photographers, that is gonna be the reason that you invest in one system or the other. Those super mega zoom prime lenses are a reason to stick to one system, because when you're spending $10,000 plus on a super telephoto zoom lens, the camera doesn't even matter at that point. It is the lens that you're buying and then whatever camera to attach to that lens. If all of a sudden I found myself in a situation where I needed more speed, if I needed to shoot wildlife, then something like Sony's A9 III that has the global shutter, or the A1. We kind of like talked about this, where the R1 is a great, fast camera, but it's a big camera. And if I had to carry around a big camera and I was shooting wildlife, I would prefer to have something that is a little bit more compact when I need it. And then if I do want to add a grip, that is something that's optional. But maybe you're someone who has switched from Canon to Sony and you have a reason that I haven't thought of, or maybe that I've overlooked. If that's you, let me know down in the comments what your thing is, what your big sticking point is. And until the next one, check out this video here, first of all, if you want to see more from the Sony Alpha 1 Mark II. But grab your camera, get out, and go shoot photos.